This is CBC Windsor News. I'm Chris Henson. Katerina is away this week. We start in Harrow, where officials are trying to understand why a house is burnt to the ground. It's where the Walsh family was found murdered last summer in what police described as a case of intimate partner violence. The house was sold to a new owner earlier this year, but as Dawson Chen reports, it's once again a crime scene.
Police say the fire took place around 10:20 p.m. on March 10th. Essex Mayor Sherry Bondi, who lives nearby, says a member of her family noticed the flames and called 911.
I went down to see just how big the fire was. You know, I've seen quite a few fires now, and by the time we got there, which I'm 5 minutes away, the house was already basically engulfed in flames. And I think that it was kind of like opening a wound, to be honest.
Fire officials have not disclosed why they consider this incident to be suspicious. OPP say their investigation continues and they're looking for witnesses. Dawson Chen, CBC News, Harrow.
There have been a lot of questions raised with the community spread of measles in our region. Health reporter Jennifer LaGrassa with a look at what you need to know.
With multiple measles cases confirmed in Windsor, Essex, and Chatham, Kent, and more expected to pop up, here's what you need to know in order to stay safe. Measles is a highly contagious respiratory infection. It's spread through the air when someone who is sick coughs, sneezes, or talks.
We would estimate that one person who has measles could perhaps infect 20 people. It's one of the most infectious communicable diseases we deal with.
I understand the concern of our community. We are monitoring this situation carefully as it evolves.
Symptoms start with a cough, runny nose, and irritated eyes. Then there could be a rash, as well as pneumonia or brain swelling. It can be deadly. Health officials are concerned because they haven't seen community spread like this in years. In Canada, measles has been considered completely gone since 1998, but dropping vaccination rates and international travel have led to new cases. Health officials say that vaccination is the best protection. In Ontario, kids will get the first dose of the measles, mumps, and rubella vaccine at 12 months. Then they will get a second dose of this vaccine between the ages of 4 to 6. Overall, the risk in our community is still low. That's because the vaccination rates are high.
The people that we're most worried about are unvaccinated people because they're the people that are most susceptible to getting measles if they're exposed.
If you don't know whether you're vaccinated or if you worry about your kids who can't get the vaccine just yet, you can call your family doctor or local public health unit for more information. If you're born before 1970, you are considered immune. And if you think that your kids might have measles, call ahead to your clinic or family doctor just so you can take all precautions before going there to make sure you don't spread it to others. Jennifer LaGrassa, CBC News, Windsor.
Colette Kennedy joins us now. You were not lying about that chill off there, eh?
Yeah, a big turnaround, right, in terms of what we were dealing with. But hey, that was this morning, -3 degrees. This was at 6 a.m. But as the day wore on, it took some time kind of breaking through with the sunshine. We did get up there to 7 degrees, 5 degrees from Chatham, Kent. But indeed, there have been some breezy conditions out there, so it's made it feel a little cooler. The wind's coming in off the lake. Overnight tonight, -1. Yes, still a wind chill of -5. But look at this tomorrow. Here we go. Mostly sunny, 12 degrees for the high. Rain on the way for the weekend, though. Chris, I'll have the details coming up.
Sounds great. Thanks, Colette.
You're welcome.
Doug Ford met with Prime Minister-designate Mark Carney today ahead of his trip to Washington tomorrow to meet with members of the Trump administration. Talks the Premier hopes will help de-escalate this trade war that we're in. Queen's Park reporter Lorna Redekop has the latest.
Premier Doug Ford started his day away from the video cameras. A breakfast meeting with Prime Minister-designate Mark Carney. No journalists allowed. Trade and tariffs part of the discussion before Ford flies to Washington tomorrow to meet with U.S. President Donald Trump's Commerce Secretary. And today, Trump again mentioned Ontario, declaring a win. Yesterday, Ford agreed to pause the 25% price hike for electricity to 3 U.S. states.
We had a problem with Ontario, and they dropped that when I let them know what we were going to be doing. They dropped it immediately, so I'm glad, because electricity, you shouldn't be playing with electricity. It affects people's lives.
Yesterday, Trump also backed off his threat to hike steel and aluminum tariffs to 50%, instead increasing them by 25%. Ford's reaction to the Trump team's characterization?
They want to call it a win. whatever. They're playing politics.
As for what he's looking for in Washington,
Our message down there tomorrow is let's stop this. It's going to hurt both economies. It's American people that are going to get hurt. Canadians are going to get hurt. Let's sit down and start moving forward on what you want to see in the USMCA and what we want to see.
the USMCA, referring to the trade deal Canada has with the U.S. and Mexico. But Ford is tempering expectations, saying this is just a first step on trade or tariffs.
I want to find out where their bar is set, rather than keep moving the goalpost.
Ford was back on U.S. cable news again today.
You know, Trump already clashed with Prime Minister Trudeau, or as he called him, Governor Trudeau. You met with the new Prime Minister, Mark Carney.
Ford praised Mark Carney, calling him an astute business person and smart.
He's not Prime Minister Trudeau. We need to move on from Prime Minister Trudeau and move forward and get this deal done.
He later told reporters at Queen's Park he expects it'll be a better relationship with Trump. Lorenda Redicomp, CBC News, Toronto.
Canada is hitting the U.S. with tariffs on nearly $30 billion worth of goods after Trump slapped those 25% tariffs on steel and aluminum. The dollar-for-dollar retaliatory tariffs, they're going to take effect at midnight. Vanessa Lee has the latest.
Canadian officials say the new levies target $12.6 billion in steel and $3 billion in aluminum. The counter tariffs will also apply to other products, including computers, sporting equipment, and cast iron goods. Finance Minister Dominic LeBlanc, who is the government's point person on Canada-U.S. relations, calls Trump's attack on the Canadian industry unjustified and unjustifiable, and says Canada must retaliate as the U.S. disrupts what was once one of the most successful trading relationships in the world.
We will continue to maintain our countermeasures and increase them on April 2nd. This is no surprise to the American administration if we can't get to a position where their initial measures are all lifted.
Prime Minister-designate Mark Carney was in Hamilton, Canada's steel capital, today. He says he will make sure proceeds from Canada's tariffs go back to support workers in the affected industries here, adding he believes in open borders, but Canada is doing this in response to Trump's actions.
We are ready to sit down with the Americans, with the U.S. government. I'm ready to sit down with President Trump.
All of this uncertainty is having an impact on the bottom line of so many Canadian businesses, including here at Nagas Innovation, which produces energy recovery ventilation units used in places like schools and seniors' homes. President Michel-André Lamarche says they've had to cut the hours of 60 workers at its sister plant who are working 4 days a week now instead of 5 because business has slowed down.
Clients are not asking for our products anymore on the U.S. side because of the uncertainty. Some orders have been canceled or just deviated to U.S. suppliers. So we are losing orders on the U.S. side, which is only 20% of our sales right now, but it's 100% of our growth. That's where we wanted to grow. And now that's being, demolished.
Even though Ottawa has announced $6 billion in aid for affected businesses, many say that will do little to help, considering the magnitude of contracts and relationships at stake. Vanessa Lee, CBC News, Varennes, Quebec.
And this is not just a Canadian thing. The European Union is ratcheting up a global trade war in the wake of tariffs on their steel and aluminum imports. The world's biggest trading bloc announced retaliatory tariffs on American industrial and agricultural exports. CBC's Richard Madden has the latest.
The European Union treats us very badly.
President Donald Trump's trade war has gone global, with the European Union and Canada slapping billions in tariffs on U.S. products after Trump slapped tariffs on all steel and aluminum imports and threatening further escalation.
So whatever they charge us, we're charging them.
In his meeting with Ireland's Prime Minister, a country that's part of the EU, Trump defended his tariff agenda, accusing other countries of stealing wealth from the U.S., including Canada. Now, yesterday, Trump threatened to double tariffs on Canadian metals after Ontario Premier Doug Ford briefly taxed electricity supplied to 3 northern border states. Both sides eventually backed down.
We had a problem with Ontario, and they dropped that when I let them know what we were going to be doing. They dropped it immediately, so I'm glad, because electricity, you shouldn't be playing with electricity. It affects people's lives there.
Trump adding to his list of grievances, threatening to slap more tariffs on Canada's protected dairy sector covered under the modernized USMCA agreement Trump signed in his first term.
Yeah, that Canada's absolutely one of the worst. Their dairy products, they charge our farmers 240, 250, 270, and 400%.
Now, these tariff tensions come ahead of a key meeting Thursday between federal ministers, Premier Ford, and Commerce Secretary Howard Lutnick, who convinced Ford to pause his energy surcharge.
And we're going to lower the temperature. You know, he thought he'd be sort of the big man and tackle Donald Trump, but you know you can't tackle Donald Trump.
Now, the Canadian delegations are looking for a win or at least some assurances in that meeting, as the White House insists its tariffs on all Canadian imports they agreed to pause for a month to negotiate are set to be lifted in April. Richard Madden, CBC News, Washington.
G7 foreign ministers convene for a meeting tomorrow in Quebec. Today, in Ireland, U.S. Secretary of State Marco Rubio was asked if Canada becoming a 51st U.S. state would be on the agenda. The answer was no.
Well, that's not what we're going to discuss at the G7, and that's not what we're going to be discussing in our trip here. So they're the host nation, and I mean, we have a lot of other things we work on together. We defend North America through NORAD and the airspace of our continent together. So not to mention the issues of Ukraine and other commonalities. So we're going to be focused in the G7 on all of those things. That's what the meeting is about. It is not a meeting about how we're going to take over Canada.
Back here in Windsor, the push to turn Ojibwe Park and surrounding natural spaces into a national park continues. On Saturday, Canada's Minister of Environment popped in to recommit to that park. But today, Windsor's mayor and the Windsor West NDP MP slammed the government's announcement, calling it a hollow pre-election promise.
This work needs to happen. And I want to reaffirm our commitment to seeing the National Urban Park happen. We have been proud stewards of this land since 1957. There's no way we were walking away or giving up on that prospect today. But we need to see work happen, and they can't be hollow pre-election promises.
Now, the fight over the national park centers on how it's created. The Liberal government is moving forward through the National Urban Parks policy streams. NDP MP Brian Massey has led a bill through Parliament that sits in the Senate. The City of Windsor owns most of the land that is expected to become part of the new park. Today, the mayor says they haven't had any recent discussions with Parks Canada about next steps. Massey's bill is on hold while government is prorogued. He's urging lawmakers to pass the bill when politicians return to Ottawa, or for the government to create the park through an order in council. The Bank of Canada has once again lowered its benchmark interest rate, this time by a quarter point amid the ongoing trade war with the U.S. The key lending rate now sits at 2.75%. That's the lowest in almost 3 years. Bank of Canada Governor Tiff McCallum says the Canadian economy started strong this year, but the on-again, off-again trade war with the U.S. is starting to weigh on the Canadian economy. Uncertainties shaking business and consumer confidence. He warned that economic damage could be severe depending on how steep these tariffs are and how long they're kept in place. Well, we broke a bunch of records last year, so a round of applause for folks here in Windsor, Essex. Okay, this is specifically for the bird watchers. We hit high counts for 52 bird sightings in 2024, a high count of pelicans, and a first nesting record for a rare and endangered owl. Earlier today, Windsor Morning host Amy Dodge spoke to a University of Windsor graduate student about the birds on the list that stood out to him.
Barn owl, that stood out as a major exciting point for us. And we did have Canada's first nesting record of blue grosbeak, and that was actually in the Windsor area, cool enough. So that was just in the Ojibwe complex. So it was very interesting to have a first nesting record for the entire country.
So what was it like when you saw the barn owl?
That's a dream come true. That's such a rare species for us. We've had 4 records since 2014, so basically in the last 10 years, which might seem like enough. But really, the last report from the Ontario Breeding Bird Atlas only suggests that like 5 to 10 pairs breed in the whole province. So coming across any individual barn owl is really kind of a magical experience.
And you spotted some Arctic terns last year. Why is that significant?
So Arctic tern is a pretty major rarity for us. We only had a handful of records before last year. Last year, we actually had 3 different Arctic terns in the county. And I spotted 2 of them. I was fortunate enough to be the one to find 2 of them at the tip of Point Pelee. And it's the world's longest migrating animal, so it travels all the way from the Arctic to the Antarctic every year. So it showing up in Point Pelee is pretty rare.
Not bad at all. No birds out there in this shot. We're back after the break. Palestinian activist was arrested in New York Saturday for his role in last year's Columbia University student demonstrations against Israel. It's all part of a wider push by the Trump administration to crack down on foreign students involved in so-called illegal protests. CBC's Chris Reyes explains.
Down with occupation! A large crowd gathered outside a downtown Manhattan courthouse, while inside, Mohammed Khalil's lawyers pleaded with a federal judge to bring the pro-Palestinian activist back to New York, where he resides with his wife, an American citizen who is currently pregnant with their child. The brief hearing wrapped with no decision on his release.
As we try to make clear in court today, what happened to Mahmoud Khalil is nothing short of extraordinary and shocking and outrageous. It should outrage anybody who believes that speech should be free in the United States of America.
Khalil is currently being held in Louisiana after he was arrested in New York. Immigration officials say they were acting on a U.S. State Department order to revoke Khalil's permanent residency status for organizing pro-Palestinian protests at Columbia University. President Trump recently declared that more foreign students could be sent back to their country if they're deemed to be agitators or illegal protesters. Khalil's lawyers read a statement from his wife, who was in court but did not want to be identified.
My husband was kidnapped from our home, and it's shameful that the United States government continues to hold him because he stood for the rights and lives of his people. I demand his immediate release and return to our family.
In this crowd, in addition to those who are fighting for the Palestinian cause, are everyday New Yorkers who are concerned that the arrest of Mahmoud Khalil represents a dangerous overreach by the Trump administration.
The right to protest is sacred. Without it, we cannot stop them from doing whatever they want to whomever they want.
The fact that there was no warrant for him, he did nothing wrong, he committed no crimes. I mean, this is just a clear example of how this administration is going to treat anybody who is speaking out against them.
Organizers of the protest say they plan to keep showing up until Khalil is released.
We need to make sure that the mass movement, that all of the majority of people in the United States who are seeing how important this issue is, also stay out in the streets and don't let this issue get sidelined.
Another hearing is set for this week while Khalil remains in custody in Louisiana. Chris Reyes, CBC News, New York.
A Canadian-led research mission to the Southern Hemisphere is underway on the HMCS Margaret Brooke. A team of scientists on the Royal Canadian Navy patrol vessel are conducting research on the impact of climate change in the region. CBC's international climate correspondent Susan Ormiston reports.
The commander of the Canadian Navy, Angus Topshee, motored out to meet HMCS Margaret Brooke waiting in Maxwell Bay. Greeted with Navy tradition and by the ship's captain, Terry Scher.
So awesome to see you. Welcome to Antarctica.
The Antarctic leg of this deployment is focused on climate science.
Usually we do see at some point down in the depth here, the lines start to run straight up and down.
The ship transformed into a research hub for scientists working night and day now to gather as much Antarctic data as they can with little time left.
Was it really worth the expense and effort of this? My feeling right now from having talked to the scientists and seen the crew on board and the knowledge that we've gained, I think it is worthwhile. I haven't seen a football field yet.
But Vice Admiral Topshee has a strategic goal for this mission, touring a nearby Chilean base, which includes Air Force support and a landing strip for all the international stations nearby. On one side, obscured, is a Russian base with its own Orthodox church. On the other, 2 kilometers away, is a Chinese one named the Great Wall.
We can see what China and Russia have been doing in and around the Canadian North. I wonder what's going on in the South Pole, and we'll get the perspective and experience of the South American navies.
Do you think there's a security concern here in Antarctica, as there is in the Arctic?
I definitely do. I am concerned that the whole agreement that we would not militarize the Arctic, that we would not exploit the resources of the Antarctic, could change.
From here, the Margaret Brooke heads on, crossing the Antarctic Circle to the most southerly point of this expedition. Susan Ormiston, CBC News in Maxwell Bay, Antarctica.
If you think that there's something that we should cover or something you want to tell us, send us an email, windsor@cbc.ca. Elaine just did. Beautiful. Colette Kennedy joins us again for a full look at the forecast here. So you teased out the rain, but you told us a little bit of heat too.
Yeah, we do have the heat coming back our way, too. We start really turning things around, Chris, as soon as tomorrow we go back into highs in the double digits, and just kind of showing you, illustrating this, where here's the cooler air pushing across Ontario. And yeah, 6 degrees, not bad, our current temperature, but very close by, you see, never mind just double digits, some 20s in there as well, and we may get there. So hang on a moment. We'll get to the 5-day forecast in just a moment. We're not getting there tomorrow. We're just going to be warming up a little more significantly. 5 degrees currently, Chatham-Kent, Sarnia at 6 degrees as well. And I'll tell you, around Chatham-Kent especially, the winds have been just blowing a little bit harder there. So sustained winds at 35, but you can see still having some gusts there over 45 kilometers an hour. Just around 30, not too bad here for Windsor, and then not very gusty, and that's why you just see the directional arrows in other parts of the province there. So yes, some cloud cover there. A lot of this just some higher thin cloud. Thicker as we travel towards the east, and even along that frontal boundary, a little bit of flurry activity, mostly in the upper atmosphere, not really making its way towards the ground. That cloud deck pushes away. You'll see some kind of blowing back up just because of the direction of the winds and the influence of the lakes. Where you don't see it is here into southwestern Ontario. We should be well into the sunshine for Thursday, and that's going to help too with the warm up that's coming our way. Then into Friday, could get at times into more of a mix of sun and cloud, but it's not until we really get into the weekend that we've got this next system that's going to come in, bringing not only some rain, certainly mild temperatures, but some windy conditions in there as well. So kind of a lot going on into the weekend. Overnight temperatures tonight, another cool one just in the sense that we are going to be slipping below freezing. So -1 to -2, that low that we'll be finding around Windsor. Here you go tomorrow. How about up to 12 degrees with those mostly sunny skies. 2 degrees a low Thursday night into Friday. A little bit of cloud cover mixing in, but still looking like a pretty nice day in terms of the sky conditions on Friday. Flirting with 20 degrees for the high, but we'll go to 19. But here it is into the weekend. So Saturday, at least how things are tracking at this time, we will have showers developing, winds picking up, 20 degrees though for that high. But as we go into Sunday, the heaviest rain overnight period probably, and then tapering off on Sunday, but then the temperature, Chris, will be falling too.
Okay, good to keep an eye on if we can look past Friday, which I don't think many of us can. Patio night for sure.
That's right.
All right, thanks for this, Colette. Have a good night, everybody. CBC.ca/Windsor for more news if you need it.
Good night.